Hello. So there are a few issues I want to cover in this video, and these are issues I think are extremely important for this country. Um, this is probably not going to be the last video I make on the subject, so I'm not going to make it too lengthy because there are other issues to cover. Reflective smoke there. Well, the issue I want to talk about is electoral reform in Britain today and why I believe it is necessary. Like I say, this is going to be an outline of my ideas, not a comprehensive sort of analysis of the whole situation. That's not the intention. I'm simply sharing ideas for people to discuss, debate, and so on. So I'm giving the outline here. Um, I think it's a good time to do it because today we mark 800 years since Magna Carta was signed. It's not an exact anniversary because obviously with the introduction of the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar, the exact time frame is not, well, it's not exact, but roughly 800 years since King John was forced to sign the Magna Carta in 1215. If you don't know the background to that, to basically simplify it, at that time there were powerful lords in England called barons, and they controlled large segments of land. They were the equivalent, I guess, of powerful politicians today, although we have to be very careful with comparisons because it's not, it was a very, very, very different time. Um, and At the time, there was an absolute monarchy, and that absolute monarchy actually continued until the Glorious Revolution of 1688. However, the significance of Magna Carta was this was an event whereby subjects, albeit powerful subjects, stood up to the king and ultimately got their way. Um, Although it's widely believed that King John didn't respect the terms of the Magna Carta, but the very fact that the barons could put him in that position as they did is highly significant. Um, Amongst the key demands of Magna Carta was that more power be divulged to Parliament of that time. To the Parliament of that time, it was signed in a place called Runnymede, on the banks of the River Thames in Surrey. It's thought that King John himself may not have been present. It was probably his representatives. In fact, the Royal Mint was criticised for depicting King John personally signing the Magna Carta, because that may not have happened. There have been copies, incidentally, of the original manuscripts, and again, it may not even have been the king's representatives. It may have been representatives of the various cathedrals in which those manuscripts were signed. Bearing in mind at that time, the only people who could read and write were usually in the clergy, possibly sometimes nobles, but certainly not the average man. Um, so the significance of Magna Carta is not that it was the beginning of democracy for Britain, because it certainly wouldn't even closely resemble what we would consider to be democracy today. But it was, I believe, the beginning of a very long process of democratization. Um, I mean, the fact of the matter is, in 1215, the vast majority of people had, very few legal rights, had very few civic rights. So we couldn't make a rational comparison between then and events of later on. But was the very beginning of this process. It opened the gateway to the process. Subsequently, we had the English Bill of Rights in 1688, the Great Reform Act of 1832, and universal women's suffrage in 1928. So, this was a long process of democratization. Now, what I want to talk about in this video, well, two things actually. Firstly, in order to mark that anniversary, David Cameron made a speech at Runnymede, which he supposedly defended his controversial position on the Human Rights Act. Tories want to suspend that. David Cameron says that the term is being abused and we need a British Bill of Rights. It's a contentious point of view. I actually wrote to my local MP on this and she replied. She actually replied on that issue. She voted against it, against the plan to repeal it. And that's very controversial because the Human Rights Act has protected people in very serious legal situations. But anyway, David Cameron used the anniversary of Magna Carta to defend his policies. Another event that happened in this anniversary was a statue of the Queen was unveiled, and I find that quite interesting that a statue of the Queen would be unveiled on the anniversary of Magna Carta. Personally, my instinct that this is a strange choice and it's inappropriate. Now, Magna Carta wasn't, like I say, it wasn't like the Great Reform Act. It wasn't a major democratic move as we would see democracy today, but it certainly was not representative of the power of the monarchy. It was the people, albeit powerful nobles, um, standing up to the king. So it seems strange that using the head of state as a personification of Magna Carta, to me that's a strange choice. And if they're going to use a head of state, it was King John that was involved. I guess the rationale behind this is that the Queen represents constitutional as opposed to absolute monarchy. But I still think it is inappropriate. Surely Magna Carta began the process that was exemplified by such civic movements as the Chartists, as the suffragettes, so surely some sort of civic movement would be better as a personification of Magna Carta. Even the barons themselves. Now, just to be clear, these barons were not crusaders for democracy in the way that we would know them today. In fact, they would very likely be the sort of people sitting in the House of Lords and be opposed to electoral reform. But the point is, this was something that was unheard of at the time for barons to stand up to the king. So it is significant. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is electoral reform. I believe it is absolutely essential in this country. One of the main reasons I support the Liberal Democrats, and I didn't actually mention this in the main video, I really should have done, was because as a party, they really pioneered the need for electoral reform in this country. Now, there is an interesting chart in the newspaper as to what this country would look like post 2015 election had we had proportional representation. Um, if we had proportional representation, today's parliament would be something like this. The percentage of national vote would be 36.9% for the Tories, 30.5% for Labour, 12.6% for UKIP, 7.80% for the Lib Dems, 4.7% for the SNP, 3.80% of the Greens. The actual seats won in the general election. The Tories got 331, Labour got 232, UKIP got 1, the Lib Dems got 8, the SNP got 56, which is very contentious, the Greens got 1. Now this is interesting because if you look at the actual number of popular votes, that is just the number of votes that the parties got, UKIP and the Lib Dems got significantly more than the SNP. UKIP got close to 4 million votes, the Lib Dems got 2.5 million, the SNP got about 1.4 million. This is rounding it off. Yet the SNP is represented by 56 MPs, represented, by the way, in a system they don't even believe in. And yet UKIP and the Lib Dems got 1 and 8 each. Now, and the Greens were also underrepresented. They got, I believe, over 1 million votes this time. They've 1 MP to show for it. Now, seats under PR. And what I'm going to do is read the number of seats that they would have under PR and the number of seats they got again. Under PR, the Conservatives would have 242. They currently have 331. Under PR, Labour would have 199. They currently have 232. UKIP would have 82. They currently have 1. Lib Dems would have 51. They currently have 8. The SNP would have 31. They currently have 56. The Greens would have 24. They currently have 1. So clearly, there's a big discrepancy here. Now, what this shows is that Conservatives, Labour, and the SNP would lose seats under a PR system. UKIP, the Lib Dems, and the Greens would gain seats. But the point is, it would be more representative of the votes they actually got. Now, the Tories would still be the biggest party, and the SNP would still have done very well in Scotland. So, if they would complain that, oh, but we'll lose out, the point is they would still be the biggest parties. The Tories would still be the biggest party in England. The SNP would still be the biggest party in Scotland. Now, I've made no secret of the fact that I'm no fan of the SNP, but under electoral reform, they would still be the biggest party in Scotland. They would still probably be in charge of the first of the Scottish Parliament. So, the notion that this is a Westminster conspiracy is rubbish, because actually that's something the SNP and the Tories would have in common, that they would both presumably be opposed to electoral reform. The SNP, I assume, would oppose it because it means that they would lose out. Nicola Sturgeon is already trying to attack the three non-SNP MPs in Scotland. Certainly, Labour and the Tories have long, or at least a large segment of the parties have long opposed electoral reform. Could this be because those two parties have played seesaw of power for the last 60 years? You know, um, of course, like any important issue, there should be debate about this. But to me, it just makes no sense that a party that gets 1.4 million votes can have more MPs than a party that gets 2.5 million or 4 million. It just makes no sense. Now, UKIP's position is interesting. They used to oppose electoral reform, at least some of their spokespeople did. Now they're starting to change their tune. I find it a little bit interesting that they are claiming to be now the crusaders for electoral reform. It's the Lib Dems that pioneered this. The Lib Dems are the party that suffered most in this election, unfairly so, in my opinion. Um, these are very important issues. I'm going to leave a link to that chart and let you debate this yourself. But just incidentally, I would be arguing this regardless of which party we're talking about. I believe that we need a situation whereby the popular vote is represented rather than the number of seats. I believe the popular vote really needs to exemplify our democracy. Let me know your thoughts.